Muhammad Ali sat completely still as the number was spoken out loud. $100 million. Not a rumor, not a headline, not a joke. The offer came directly from a king, a ruler whose wealth was measured in oil fields, palaces, and nations. A man who could buy silence, loyalty, and influence with a single signature. The room was calm, almost respectful. Advisors stood nearby. Guards watched quietly. Papers were laid out neatly on a polished table, waiting for one thing to happen. Everyone expected Muhammad Ali to smile, maybe laugh, maybe negotiate, maybe lean forward and ask a question. After all, this was more money than most athletes would see in several lifetimes. Enough to secure generations. Enough to erase every financial worry forever. But Ali didn't touch the papers. He didn't ask for time. He didn't even look at the number again. Instead, he looked up slowly and locked eyes with the king. Something shifted in the room. The smiles faded. The air felt heavier. The confidence of the advisors suddenly felt uncertain. Because Muhammad Ali wasn't reacting the way powerful men expected him to. He wasn't intimidated. He wasn't impressed. He wasn't tempted. For a few seconds, no one spoke. And then Ali said something so unexpected, so calm, so deeply rooted in belief, that the entire room went silent. This wasn't the response of a boxer chasing fame. This wasn't the reaction of a man dazzled by wealth. This was the voice of someone who had already lost everything once, and refused to lose himself again. What Muhammad Ali said next wouldn't just reject 100 million. It would challenge the very idea of power. It would expose the difference between owning wealth and being owned by it. And years later, people wouldn't remember the king's name nearly as clearly as they remembered this moment, when a man stood before unimaginable riches and chose something far more dangerous. His principles. Stay with me, because the real reason Muhammad Ali refused, 100 million has nothing to do with money, and everything to do with who he truly was. The meeting didn't happen in a boxing ring. There were no cameras flashing, no cheering crowds, no ropes, no gloves. It took place inside a private royal palace, a space designed to remind visitors exactly who held the power. The floors were marble, polished until they reflected the ceiling lights like still water. Gold details lined the walls, not loudly, but deliberately, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Security stood at a distance, silent, watchful. This was a place where decisions were made that shaped countries. And sitting there, in the middle of it all, was Muhammad Ali. Not dressed like a king, not trying to impress anyone, calm, grounded, observant. The man hosting the meeting was one of the most powerful rulers in the world, a king whose influence extended far beyond his borders. A man used to hearing, yes, immediately, respectfully, without hesitation. This king didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His power was already understood. The proposal was presented carefully, respectfully, almost generously. A long-term partnership, global visibility, unlimited resources. And then the number was placed on the table. $100 million. Not tied to performance. Not dependent on future fights. No risk involved. It was money offered in exchange for alignment, influence for influence. Muhammad Ali's name, image, and voice would become associated with the king's vision. On paper, it was flawless. The advisors spoke softly, explaining how the arrangement would benefit everyone involved, how Ali's legacy would be protected, how his future would be secured. Around the room, heads nodded. To them, this wasn't pressure, it was opportunity. But Muhammad Ali wasn't listening the way they expected. He wasn't studying the documents. He wasn't calculating the number. He wasn't imagining the lifestyle. His attention was elsewhere. He watched the way the advisors spoke for the king, even when the king was silent. He noticed how carefully each sentence was shaped, how control existed even in generosity. Ali had spent his entire life recognizing power dynamics. He knew the difference between respect and ownership. The atmosphere in the room remained polite, but something subtle began to change. The longer Ali stayed quiet, the more uncomfortable the silence became. This wasn't how these meetings usually went. Athletes usually asked questions, celebrities usually smiled, icons usually accepted. But Muhammad Ali sat still. The king leaned forward slightly, not impatient, but curious. Because for the first time in a long time, someone powerful was sitting across from him who wasn't intimidated. Ali finally looked down at the papers. Then he looked back up, and in that moment, it became clear to everyone in the room. This conversation was not going to end the way they expected. What they believed was a simple agreement was about to turn into something far more personal, because Muhammad Ali wasn't deciding whether the offer was big enough. He was deciding whether accepting it would cost him something no amount of money could replace. To understand why Muhammad Ali didn't immediately respond to the offer, you have to understand what was happening inside him at that exact moment, because this wasn't the first time power had tried to buy his silence. Long before kings, palaces, and nine-figure deals, Ali had already faced a choice that cost him almost everything. Years earlier, when he refused the military draft, the world turned on him. They took his heavyweight title. They took years of his prime. They called him ungrateful. They called him arrogant. They called him a traitor. But Ali never backed down. He believed that if he betrayed his conscience once, he would spend the rest of his life trying to forgive himself. Sitting in that palace now, with 100 million on the table, those memories came rushing back. This offer wasn't loud or threatening. That's what made it dangerous. It came wrapped in respect, wrapped in admiration, wrapped in the promise of comfort. And Ali understood something most people don't. The biggest compromises in life don't arrive as ultimatums. They arrive as gifts. The advisors kept speaking, calmly, confidently, but Ali noticed how often words like representation, alignment, and mutual benefit were used. To them, it sounded professional. To Ali, it sounded familiar. He had seen this before. Power doesn't like resistance. Power prefers partnership, especially when it can shape the message. Ali wasn't afraid of losing money. He had already lost millions before. What he feared was losing control of his voice. Muhammad Ali knew that once his image was tied to something he didn't fully believe in, there was no undoing it. No refund, no apology tour, only silence. And silence was something he refused to sell. He glanced around the room. Everyone else seemed comfortable, relaxed, certain of the outcome. They assumed Ali's hesitation was about negotiation. But it wasn't. Ali was asking himself a much harder question. When people speak my name years from now, what will it stand for? Because Ali knew his fame didn't belong to him alone. It belonged to the people who saw courage in him. The people who found strength in his defiance. The people who believed he represented something bigger than boxing. If he accepted this deal, would that meaning still exist? Or would it quietly disappear behind luxury and privilege? Ali's faith weighed heavily in his heart. He believed that everything he had, strength, fame, opportunity, was a trust from God, and trusts weren't meant to be traded. At that moment, the 100 million didn't feel like a reward. It felt like a test. Quick pause here. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit like and subscribe. These kinds of stories only survive when people support them. Ali finally leaned forward. Not because he was ready to accept, but because he was ready to be honest. He thought about the young boys who looked up to him. The communities who saw him as proof that power could be challenged. The people who believed money didn't have to change who you are. If he said yes today, what lesson would that teach them? That principles have a price. That silence is smarter than courage. Ali had spent his entire life proving the opposite. The room waited. The king watched closely. Advisors exchanged quiet glances. They still believed this was a matter of persuasion. They didn't realize yet. Muhammad Ali had already made his decision. And when he finally spoke, it wouldn't just reject the money. It would redefine what real wealth actually means. Quick pause. If you respect stories about courage, faith, and standing firm, hit like. Muhammad Ali didn't rush his answer. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't shift in his chair. He didn't glance at the advisors or the papers again. He simply looked at the king. And that alone was unusual. Most men in that room avoided direct eye contact unless spoken to. Ali didn't. Not out of disrespect, but out of equality. When he spoke, his voice was steady, soft, almost gentle. Your Majesty, Ali said, I appreciate the respect you've shown me. The translators repeated his words. The room relaxed slightly. This was the opening everyone expected. But then Ali paused. Not for drama, for truth. He placed his hands together and continued. I've been offered many things in my life, he said. Comfort. Protection. Another pause. And every time, I had to ask myself the same question. The advisors leaned in. The king listened carefully now. Ali's voice didn't change, but the meaning did. Who do I belong to when I walk out of this room? No one answered. Ali nodded as if he expected that. I belong to God, he said, and to the people who believe in me. The words landed slowly. Not like a challenge, like a boundary. Ali explained that fame had a way of trapping people without chains. That once your image becomes owned, your voice follows. And once your voice is gone, no amount of money can buy it back. The king asked calmly if Ali believed the offer would silence him. Ali smiled slightly. "No," he said, "but it would expect me to choose my words carefully." That was the moment the atmosphere changed. Because Ali wasn't accusing anyone, he was revealing the truth. Ali leaned forward just enough to be heard clearly. "I've already lost everything once," he said. "My title, my career, my freedom to fight." Some of the advisors shifted uncomfortably. Ali continued, "And I learned something from that loss." He looked directly at the king. "Peace without honesty isn't peace. Wealth without freedom isn't wealth." The room went quiet. Even the translators hesitated before repeating his words. Ali then did something no one expected. He thanked the king. Not formally, not strategically, genuinely. "Your offer shows respect," Ali said, "and I don't take that lightly." Another pause. "But I can't accept it." There was no anger in his voice. No apology either. "I can't allow my name to become something I don't fully control," he said. "I can't lend my silence to anything that doesn't align with my conscience." For a brief moment, no one moved. Then the king asked a question that surprised everyone. "What would you choose instead?" he asked. Ali answered without hesitation. "I choose to leave here with my voice intact," he said. "So when I speak, people know it's truly me." That answer carried weight. Not because of volume, but because of certainty. Ali wasn't rejecting money. He was rejecting ownership, and that made him untouchable. The king leaned back. He studied Ali, not as an athlete, not as a celebrity, but as a man. And for the first time, it was clear. This meeting wasn't about buying Muhammad Ali. It was about understanding why he couldn't be bought. What happened next would surprise, even those who believed they understood power. For a moment, no one spoke. The kind of silence that follows something unexpected, not awkward heavy. The advisors avoided each other's eyes. Some stared at the table. Others looked at Muhammad Ali with expressions they hadn't prepared. This wasn't supposed to happen. Meetings like this followed a pattern: respect, offer, acceptance, or at least negotiation. But Ali had stepped outside the script. The king remained calm. That alone surprised everyone. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. Instead, he studied Ali carefully, as if seeing him for the first time, not as a champion, not as a celebrity, but as a man who couldn't be moved. Finally, the king spoke. "You are different," he said. Ali smiled politely. "I've always tried to be honest," he replied. The meeting ended shortly after. There were no arguments, no threats, no attempts to pressure Ali further, and that made the moment even more powerful. Because everyone in that room understood something important. Muhammad Ali had walked away from more money than most people could imagine, calmly. No headlines were planned that day. But stories like this never stay quiet for long. Word began to spread, quietly at first. Among diplomats, among business leaders, among people who understood exactly what 100 million meant. Some were shocked. Others were confused. A few were critical. Why would anyone say no to that? They asked. He could have done so much good with that money. But those closest to Ali understood. This wasn't about generosity. It was about independence. Ali had never been comfortable being owned, not by promoters, not by governments, not by kings. As whispers turned into conversations, the story grew, and with it reactions became stronger. Some praised Ali's courage. Others called him foolish. A few claimed he was arrogant for refusing such generosity. Ali didn't respond. He never felt the need to explain himself to people who didn't understand his values. But what surprised many was what happened next. Instead of damaging relationships, Ali's refusal earned him something rare. Respect. Not admiration, respect. Even among powerful circles, people began to realize that Ali operated by a code most couldn't afford to follow. And codes like that make people uncomfortable, because they can't be negotiated. If this moment made you pause, hit like and comment where you're watching from. I want to know how this story is landing with you. But the ripple effect didn't stop with world leaders. Regular people heard the story too. Young athletes, students, everyday workers, people who faced smaller versions of the same choice. Security or integrity, silence or truth, comfort or conscience. Ali's refusal became more than a headline. It became a reminder that saying no to power doesn't always make you weaker. Sometimes it makes you untouchable. Yet while the world debated his decision, Muhammad Ali was facing something far more personal. Something money couldn't protect him from. Something that would test his strength in a way boxing never had. And it would force people to ask a different question. Was Muhammad Ali truly strong because of his fists? Or because of what he refused to surrender? That question would follow him for the rest of his life. and its answer would only become clearer with time.
Dearly, if this moment surprised you, tap like and comment where you're watching from.
Years passed. The palace faded into memory. The 100 million offer became a story people whispered about. But Muhammad Ali kept moving forward, speaking, traveling, inspiring. And then, quietly, something began to change. His movements slowed, his hands, once lightning fast, began to shake. At first, Ali didn't speak about it. He had spent his life being strong in front of the world. Admitting weakness didn't come naturally to him. But the diagnosis eventually came: Parkinson's disease. For a man whose body had been his voice, it was cruel in a way words can't fully describe. The fighter who once danced across the ring now struggled with simple motions. The man known for his poetry and rhythms spoke more slowly. Some people wondered if this was the moment Ali would regret his choices. The money he had refused, the deals he had walked away from, the comfort he could have secured. But Ali never expressed regret. In fact, those closest to him noticed something unexpected. As his physical strength faded, his inner peace seemed to grow. Ali continued to appear in public, not to prove anything, but to be present. When he spoke, people leaned in, not because he was loud, but because he was honest. He once said that on Judgment Day, God wouldn't ask him how many championships he won. God would ask him how he lived. Ali believed every choice he had made was preparing him for that moment. The refusal of 100 million wasn't an isolated decision. It was part of a pattern, a life spent choosing meaning over comfort. As the years went on, Ali became something different. Not just a champion, a symbol. People who had never watched a boxing match knew his name. They saw a man who stood with shaking hands but unshaken principles. In 1996, when Muhammad Ali lit the Olympic torch, the world watched in silence. His body trembled, but his spirit did not. That moment told the story better than words ever could. Here was a man who had given up so much, yet stood richer than ever. No palace, no fortune, no power deal, just dignity. Ali's life became proof that wealth is not what you accumulate, it's what you refuse to trade away. People began to revisit the stories. The draft refusal, the lost titles, the rejected money, and suddenly they made sense. Ali wasn't reckless, he was consistent. Every decision came from the same place: faith, integrity, freedom. When asked if he wished he had taken easier paths, Ali smiled. "I'm happy," he said, "not comfortable, not powerful, happy," because happiness to him came from alignment, not advantage. And as his voice softened over time, his message grew louder. That a person's true worth is revealed not when they are offered nothing, but when they are offered everything. Ali had been offered everything, and he chose himself. That choice didn't make him poorer. It made him timeless, because long after the money was forgotten, Muhammad Ali's values remained undefeated. When people look back at Muhammad Ali's life, they usually start with the highlights, the championships, the knockouts, the confidence, the famous lines. But the moments that truly defined him didn't happen under bright lights or roaring crowds. They happened in quiet rooms, in moments where no one would have blamed him for saying yes. Saying yes to comfort, yes to safety, yes to money. The day Muhammad Ali refused 100 million from a king wasn't about defiance. It was about alignment. Ali understood something most people spend their entire lives chasing. That peace comes from knowing who you are and refusing to trade that away. He didn't reject the money because he hated wealth. He rejected it because he loved freedom more. Freedom to speak honestly, freedom to stand with the powerless, freedom to live without apology. Ali once said that a man who has no imagination has no wings. But his real wings weren't words or fists. They were principles. Even as his body weakened, those principles carried him. They carried him through criticism, through misunderstanding, through loss. And they carried him into history. Today, Muhammad Ali is remembered not just as the greatest boxer of all time, but as one of the greatest humans ever to step into the public eye. A man who stood equal with kings, not because of money, but because of conviction. His refusal of 100 million sends a message that still matters today. That success without integrity is empty. That wealth without freedom is a cage. That silence in exchange for comfort costs more than it gives. If this story moved you, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. More powerful stories like this are coming. Because stories like Ali's remind us of something important. Every one of us will face a moment, big or small, where our values are tested. It might not be 100 million. It might be a promotion, a shortcut, a moment of silence when speaking up feels risky. And in that moment, the question won't be, what do I gain? It will be, what do I become? Muhammad Ali answered that question with courage. And because of that, his legacy lives far beyond boxing. Now tell me in the comments, which part of Muhammad Ali's story impacted you the most? Was it the refusal itself, his faith, or the way he stayed true to himself until the very end? Your feedback helps us create better stories, stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us what truly matters. More great videos are on the way. And if this story taught you anything, let it be this. The greatest victories don't happen in the ring. They happen in moments when no one is watching, and you choose who you really are.